Welcome to The Great Detectives of Old Time Radio, brought to you by BetterHelp.com. If you have a comment, email it to me, box13@greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Detectives, and check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/Great Detectives. If you want to enjoy more old-time radio detective audio dramas every day, be sure to follow the podcast, or if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and mark the notification bell. In a moment, we'll be bringing you episodes 3, 4, and 5 of the Lansing fraud matter as Johnny continues his investigation into a very suspicious life insurance policy. The original air dates are December 14th, 15th, and 16th of 1955. But before we get started, I want to let you know about our sponsor. Today's program is sponsored by BetterHelp. Recently, I took my son out for his first shopping trip where he got to ride in the cart. And I took him to a store where I often buy maybe more junk food than I should. But seeing him sitting there, I felt a little self-conscious because I wanted to be a good example and found myself buying far less food than I usually would. And of course, that's part of life. We continue to learn and grow and change, often finding we have different priorities than we used to. Therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk through things. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. It can help you learn coping skills and how to set boundaries and empower you to be the best version of yourself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, so it's really flexible, and you can get it to work around your schedule. You fill out a brief questionnaire, and you'll get matched to a licensed therapist. And one of the best parts is you can switch therapists at any time at no additional cost to you. Discover your potential. Visit BetterHelp.com/detectives today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/detectives. And now, yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
From Hollywood, it's time now for
Johnny Dollar.
This is Arlene Kennedy. You called my home, Mr. Dollar?
Oh, yes, Mrs. Kennedy. I'm with Universal Adjustment Bureau. We're investigating the matter of James Lansing's death.
Your what?
We're investigating your brother's death before we take action on your claim as his beneficiary. Under the circumstances, we have to do this, Mrs. Kennedy. I'd like to talk to you about it, if I may.
How would you like to talk to my lawyer, Mr. Dollar?
Sure, if you think it's necessary. I'd rather talk to you first.
Why?
Well, frankly, the insurance company isn't satisfied that this is a legitimate claim.
You mean you're not satisfied?
All right, then I'm not satisfied, and I represent the company in this matter. Look, we won't get anywhere this way, Mrs. Kennedy, if you'll just...
Tonight and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar, location Tucson, Arizona, to the Universal Adjustment Bureau, Home Office, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Lansing fraud. $50,000 worth. Expense account continued. Item 6, $10, car rental, to get to Catalina Vista, where Arlene Kennedy maintained a $55,000 home. It was a warm, sunny day, incredibly clear. I enjoyed it in my drive. However, I can't say I enjoyed Arlene Kennedy.
That's as far as you need to come.
What?
You must be the Mr. Dollar I spoke to on the phone.
If you didn't get the idea on the phone, I'll tell it to you again. I don't want to talk to you. Now, please get away from my home.
We'll have to talk sometime.
I don't think so.
I know so, Mrs. Kennedy.
I must ask you to take your briefcase and get out of here, Mr. Dollar, now.
I'm sorry you feel that way.
Look, my brother Jim drank himself to death. I don't know why. I just know he did it. He's dead. I'm his beneficiary. Why don't you pay me what you owe me?
We will, Mrs. Kennedy, if the circumstances are right. So far, though, we have reasonable doubt. And this investigation is for your benefit as much as it is ours.
I can hardly believe that.
When we've satisfied ourselves one way or the other, your claim will be settled.
The whole situation's cut and dry.
I'm afraid it isn't.
Mr. Dollar, I've had enough of this. I'll turn the matter over to my attorneys.
Mrs. Kennedy, I don't carry this briefcase to impress anybody, but I thought it might interest you. I have in it a copy of the physical examination your brother took 2 years ago when he applied for his insurance policy. I have a copy of the coroner's report and the results of the autopsy.
I don't care what you have.
Then maybe you'd just be interested in the conclusion. We have to discredit one item or the other. That's why we can't take any action on your claim yet. Goodbye.
Wait. What is it you want to know? I haven't seen my brother in well over 2 years, 3 years. I can't tell you a thing about him.
Were you on good terms with him?
Of course I was. I was the only one he had in the world. He left me his insurance money, didn't he?
Did he leave you anything else?
He didn't have anything else.
I understand there was a trust in the family.
He spent his a long time ago.
I understand you're a widow, Mrs. Kennedy.
I don't see what bearing that has.
Do you have any dependents?
No children, if that's what you mean.
The money from the policy would have gone to you alone.
Let me correct you. The money will come to me alone. I don't know what you people think you can do trying to weasel out of this payment, but I've already spoken with my attorneys, and they've advised me to sue for an immediate settlement and damages.
Perhaps I can save you some fees and your attorney some time, Mrs. Kennedy. Where can I contact them?
Never mind. You'll find out soon enough.
I hope you won't allow them to go so far as a courtroom without speaking to me.
We'll see about that, too. I don't need your advice.
Now, look, I'm going to tell you exactly what I'd tell them. You can pass it on to them. Your brother could have died quietly in his bed one night, and any doctor would have pronounced him a heart failure, and your claim would have been honored without delay. But James Lansing made the mistake of dropping dead on a public street, and the police took over, and before he was properly identified, an autopsy had been performed.
And I intend to sue the city for that kind of liberty. They had no right to...
They had every right. An unknown man dead on the street from unknown causes. Now, don't be childish. Because of that autopsy, we know your brother couldn't possibly have passed an insurance examination 2 years ago or 10 years ago. Not with the amount of bad health he'd collected.
But he did pass it. The insurance company accepted him as a client. They issued a policy, and you can't deny it. Jim came to me the day after he took out that policy and told me I was his beneficiary.
You said you hadn't seen him for well over 2 years. He took the exam a year ago last July.
All right, I saw him that one time.
Look, I'll lay it right on the line, Mrs. Kennedy. We don't think your brother ever took that physical examination.
What?
Someone else went up to Dr. Mayhood's office and took it for him. Someone who could pass it. Mrs. Kennedy, we aren't fools, and we don't like to be fooled. Now, we're going to find out who that someone was and how it was done. We're used to all sorts of tricks in this business and all sorts of bluffing, too. You can sue us for a settlement. You can sue us all over the place. With what I have right now, I'd be willing to meet you in a courtroom. I'm talking facts to you, Mrs. Kennedy, and I wish you'd talk them to me.
Get out of here. Get out of here, you cheap snooper, before I call the police and have you thrown out.
Some more expenses. Item 7, $6, lunch, for Jim Carter and myself.
We'll pass the cream, Johnny. Thanks.
Well, what do you think, Jim?
Mrs. Kennedy?
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to say. She's going to make it as tough as she can for us, judging from her attitude toward you this morning.
How does the commission feel?
Well, they feel very badly that something like this has come up. They've requested us to act with discretion and to act swiftly. They're certain the entire matter can be settled without legal action. Would you pass the sugar, please? Right.
Aren't they going to cooperate?
They aren't going to do anything until we show cause. They did mention that their action will take place in 10 days, so that means we've got 10 days to write such a statement.
Tell me what you've learned about Mrs. Kennedy.
Well, she was widowed 5 years ago. Her husband was a lawyer. He left her $40,000 in insurance and $15,000 in debts. Her family, the Lansings, had money at one time. Enough so that she gets 1/2 of 1/10 of 1% of an oil company out on the coast. It pays her about $750 a month. She managed to clear her house out in Catalina Vista and drive a Cadillac.
But she could use $50,000.
Of course she could use $50,000. Everybody could. Johnny, when are you going to start on the insurance agent?
Hillary Franks, I've already started. If I know my Mrs. Kennedy, she won't call a lawyer or anybody else right now. She'll talk to her agent, Mr. H. Franks, and he'll have to come to us. I don't have to go to him.
Johnny.
When you buy a radio and it goes bad, you call up the store. They didn't manufacture the set, but you complained to them just the same. Same thing with insurance. You don't call up the company, you call up the agent who sold it to you. Hillary Frank has to call me, Jim, just to look legitimate.
I hope you're right, kiddo.
After lunch, I went back to my hotel room and opened up the file Jim Carter had collected on Hillary Franks. Hillary Franks, age 56, college graduate, married, 2 children, wife deceased, income good. No record of any kind for any offense. Highly thought of by worldwide insurance officials. The 17 years with the company sort of got me. He started as an agent when he was 39.
This is Hillary Franks, Mr. Dollar.
Yes, sir.
I understand you're in town on a little investigation for the Home Office. Wonder if we could have dinner.
As a matter of fact, I was going to call you, Mr. Franks. The policy I'm working on was written by you.
Yes, I understand that. Mrs. Kennedy, the beneficiary, called me today. Seemed very upset. I thought perhaps we could discuss it over dinner.
Anything wrong with right now at your office?
Why, nothing.
I suppose you're Mr. Dollar.
Yes.
Maria, that's my secretary. She's already gone for the day. Sorry you had to wait so long.
Mr. Hillary Franks looked straight life insurance from the top of his iron gray hair to the tips of his polished brown shoes. He had a quiet manner about him and a pair of large brown eyes that looked wide open and honest.
Come in, Mr. Dollar. Thank you very much for coming over. I was surprised when Mrs. Kennedy called me about this matter today. Surprised to learn that you were in town.
Were you?
She said you'd been over to her home this morning.
That's right.
Well, just what is this all about?
We have reason to believe Mrs. Kennedy is a party to an attempted fraud, Mr. Franks.
I gathered it was something like that. I've been writing policies for worldwide insurance for 17 years, Mr. Dollar. And this is the first time anything like this has ever happened on one of them.
I believe you, Mr. Franks, and your record. But there's a first time for everything.
Yes.
I'm here to find out all I can about the circumstances under which you sold the policy to Mrs. Kennedy's brother.
Nothing unusual about it, Mr. Dollar.
I think there was.
Eh?
James Lansing was a bachelor. He lived in a fairly nice apartment on the other side of town. No dependents. Now, what made James Lansing a prospect for life insurance, Mr. Franks?
Well, it's more of a personal thing, really, I suppose. My wife and I were interested in buying a home a couple of years ago. It was one we liked in Catalina Vista. The real estate agent happened to be James Lansing. That's how we first became acquainted.
Uh-huh.
Mrs. Franks and I saw Lansing, 2 or 3 times. Had dinner together, you know. And I managed to sell him the policy.
I understood he was an engineer.
He had been at one time in Los Angeles. And he was only engaged in the real estate business here for a very short time. Really a matter of a few months.
I see. Did he do very well at it?
I don't think so. I don't think he worked hard at it. You see, he had a fairly comfortable income from money left by his father.
You didn't buy the house from him?
No.
Too much?
No. Mrs. Franks died rather suddenly about that time, and I had no need to buy a home.
But out of the association, you interested Lansing in buying insurance from you?
Yes.
What kind of a man was he?
What do you mean?
Well, just your opinion, Mr. Franks.
Well, just a client, Mr. Dollar. I looked at him and treated him just the same as any other client.
But you saw him socially several times, had dinner with him. Do you do that with all your clients?
I might. I remember he was trying to sell me something, too.
Ah, sure. How'd he look?
What?
Pale, thin, emaciated, what?
Oh, he looked fine to me.
Did he drink much?
Well, I don't recall.
Think. It's important.
Well, I don't recall.
Then I'll recall for you, Mr. Franks. Lansing did drink a lot on those occasions. As a matter of fact, he was soaked up most of the time.
Oh, now, that's not true, Mr. Dollar.
You know as well as I do, he was an alcoholic in Los Angeles, and he was an alcoholic here in Tucson. He died of malnutrition, a direct result of his alcoholic condition.
Well, I'm not a doctor. I had no way of ascertaining that.
You don't have to be a doctor to smell booze, Mr. Franks. Did you ever meet his beneficiary?
You mean his sister, Mrs. Kennedy? No. I think I told you she telephoned me today.
Never met her at all?
No.
Mr. Franks, I'm going to leave you for a while, and I want you to think about all we've discussed. When I come back, I might ask you the same questions again. And I'll expect some different answers.
Anything you say, Mr. Dollar.
Hillary Franks, 17 years insurance broker, was a bad liar. He was worse than that. He was a stupid, awkward, unprepared liar with no idea of what he was up against. He knew I was going to get him and get him good, and he didn't know what to do about it. I almost felt sorry for him. Johnny Dollar.
Jim Carter, Johnny.
Hi.
How'd you make out with Hillary Franks? The agent who sold the policy?
He's worried, he's scared, and he's already doing everything wrong. I left him about an hour ago to think things over.
Ah, Mrs. Kennedy's fighting back.
What do you mean?
Her lawyer served notice on us an hour ago to pay up on the policy or else.
Just a bluff.
Yeah, but this wasn't. She got a court order and made the coroner release her brother's body. She took it right to the crematorium. Exhibit A is a pile of ashes by now.
Uh-oh.
Her next step is to contact the State Insurance Commission and have them order us to pay off or show cause. We'll have to act fast.
Maybe I better go back to see Mr. Hillary Franks.
Tonight and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar. Location, Tucson, Arizona. To the Universal Adjustment Bureau, Home Office, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Lansing fraud. $50,000. And by now I was sure it was fraud. Expense account, item number 8, $5. Stenographic services. I dictated a hastily composed letter to the State Insurance Commission advising them that Worldwide was withholding payment on the claim of Mrs. Arlene Kennedy pending a complete investigation of the circumstances of her brother's death. I enclosed copies of the original physical examination and the coroner's autopsy findings, pointing out that in our opinion it was impossible for James Lansing to have successfully passed an insurance examination in the first place. I enclosed copies of statements from the examining physician, Dr. Mayhood, and the members of his office staff, all of whom were unable to identify the body of James Lansing. Expense account item 9, 52 cents, postage. I sent the letter to the state capitol special delivery in the hope it would arrive there before Mrs. Kennedy's lawyers took the anticipated action. After that, I drove back over to the office of Hillary Franks. He was the same as I left him an hour before. A little shaken, but still unable to realize quite what was happening.
Yes, Mr. Dollar?
Mr. Franks, I wonder if you've got anything to say to me.
Nothing, Mr. Dollar.
I was hoping you might want to make a statement.
Oh? About what?
Mrs. Kennedy's attempting to defraud your insurance company?
I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Dollar. I sold her brother an insurance policy. I don't even know Mrs. Kennedy.
There are a lot of things about this you say you don't know. You want me to lay it on the line?
If you like.
All right. Someone else had to take that physical examination for James Lansing 2 years ago. I think you arranged for someone to do it, or you helped Mrs. Kennedy arrange it. I think James Lansing was insured on that basis. I think he was insured with a clean intent to defraud. Lansing's health wouldn't permit that kind of insurance. Right now, our Los Angeles men are looking into Lansing's activities there. Somewhere along the line, they're going to turn up a medical history that'll show Lansing was already dying when he came to Arizona 2 years ago. Now, do you have anything to say, Mr. Franks?
No.
I think you're being very foolish. If it isn't clear how serious this can be with you, it's noted that you arranged for Lansing's physical examination.
There's nothing incriminating in that.
How well do you know Dr. Mayhood?
Oh, slightly. The physician is supposed to be an impartial third party. When a client has to be examined by a physician for insurance purposes, I send him to Dr. Mayhood. That's all. Dr. Mayhood sends me a Christmas card every year. I sent James Lansing to him.
Just like any other.
Just like any other.
Oh, you worry me, Mr. Franks. You don't object to my questions or get ruffled when you're caught lying. I've given you time to think and time to make a statement regarding your part in this matter.
I resent all this, Mr. Dollar. I've been an insurance broker for a good long time, and no one has ever questioned my integrity.
And I think that's what you've been banking on, Mr. Franks, your reputation. Well, I've been questioning it ever since I got here, and I still question it. You couldn't have known James Lansing without being aware of his drinking habits. I'm sorry for you, Franks, but there had to be collusion here with the beneficiary, Mrs. Kennedy. And you're the logical party.
Dollar.
You arranged for someone else to take that examination for Lansing, somebody who could pass it. Now, I've given you a chance to talk to me, but you refuse. Now we'll see how you like talking to the police about it.
What?
I'm going to swear out a warrant for your arrest.
Dollar,
I'm going to charge you with attempted fraud and collusion. And I'm going to swear out a warrant for Mrs. Kennedy, too. You're going to jail. Oh! Oh! In the 3 minutes it took me to recover from the blow from the paperweight and get my breath inside of me and my feet under me, Hillary Franks was well out of the way and out of sight. About that time, Jim Carter walked in.
Hey, what happened to you?
Hillary Franks. He got scared, swung a paperweight at me, and beat it.
Well, if he's playing rough, I don't want to take any chances.
Oh, put that phone down. He hasn't admitted anything yet.
Smacking you on the side of the head is admittance enough for me.
No, I want a statement. I think I can get one.
You have to find him first, and he's running.
He won't run far, Jim.
What makes you so sure?
Hillary Franks doesn't know how to run. It was exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon then. At 3:25, I was back out in Catalina Vista knocking on a familiar door. And the same familiar things began to happen all over again.
What do you want?
I'm here to tell you about the trouble you're in, Mrs. Kennedy. Hillary Franks gave it all away.
Gave what away? Who's Hillary Franks? What are you talking about?
About that insurance policy that was written up and issued in your brother's name. You're the one who stood to gain most by your brother's death after having someone else take an insurance examination for him. But you had to have help to pull it off. Hillary Franks helped you. For what reason or how you got him to do it, I don't know. But I do know a man with a 17-year record as insurance broker is ruined.
You're crazy. I don't know anybody named Hillary Franks. Now get out of here.
Oh, stop it, will you? I told him how he stood in this matter a half hour ago, and he socked me with a paperweight and beat it.
I've had about enough
But
of
he
you,
isn't going to
Mr.
run far. Principally because he doesn't know how to run, Mrs. Kennedy. He'll cool off, and he'll begin thinking about all this business in a new light. A few minutes ago, it dawned on him what he'd done. He'd kicked his whole lifetime right out the window. He'd been found out. He's lost all around. And he's going to be mad about that. And you're the one he's going to be mad at because you got him into it.
I told you, I don't know anybody named Hillary Franks. That's the last time I'll say it.
He'll probably want to kill you, Mrs. Kennedy.
What?
I said he'll think about all this, and he'll probably want to kill you. Do we talk now?
I don't see why. I've done nothing wrong.
Who did you get to take that physical for your brother?
I don't know what you're talking about.
You got your brother drunk enough to sign the insurance papers, didn't you?
I had nothing to do with my brother taking out life insurance and naming me his beneficiary. That was his business. Now that he's dead, it's my position to receive the payment. That's all.
Okay, Mrs. Kennedy. We'll get it all from Hillary Franks.
Yes, why don't you do that?
In the meantime, I hope you sleep well, knowing what you've done.
You'll never be able to prove any of these things you're saying. Never.
And for 24 hours, it looked as if Mrs. Kennedy might have been right. There was no way to involve her unless we had a statement from Hillary Franks, and he was still missing. I set up a watch on Mrs. Kennedy's house, and Jim Carter kept an eye on Hillary Franks' place. About 10 o'clock that night, Jim Carter drove up.
Hiya.
Hi.
Any action?
No. Mrs. Kennedy's been in all the night. No one showed up.
Mm-hmm.
How about Frank's place?
No. No one there when I left an hour ago.
You'd think he'd come back for a suitcase or some money or something.
Yeah. Hey, Johnny.
Mm-hmm.
I called in the police.
Oh.
In the name of Worldwide, I filed charges of attempted fraud and collusion against him. They issued a warrant half an hour ago. He's on an APB in all the local bulletins.
Well, I suppose you had to do it, Jim.
Yeah, we'll let the police handle this part from now on, huh?
How about Mrs. Kennedy?
We'll keep an eye on her, too.
Did you file any charges against her?
Not yet. We need a statement from Franks.
Jim.
Yeah?
What would you do if you were Hillary Franks?
Try to grab an airplane. Maybe go down on a Gallus, cross the border. Look up a friend, borrow some money. They get out and keep traveling. What?
He won't do anything like that.
Won't he?
He'll find himself a place to sit down and think. In the end, the cops won't find him. He'll find us.
Want to bet?
By the next morning, the police had still been unable to locate Hillary Franks. I left Jim Carter in the room on a long-distance call to the Insurance Commission advising them of the events up to date. Drove out to Hillary Franks' office. I noticed 2 police officers loitering across the street as I walked in the front door.
Yes?
How do you do?
Are you another policeman?
No, I'm not. Have they been bothering you a lot?
If you aren't a policeman and you know all about this, what do you want?
I want to help Mr. Franks if I can. I'm Johnny Dollar, Universal Adjustment Bureau. You're his secretary?
Yes.
How long have you worked for him?
12 years.
Do you like him?
What? He's always been a fine man. I don't believe any of these things about him, and I don't see
What's
why...
your name? I think he said Maria?
Maria Vano.
Maria, I'm not going to ask you any questions about Mr. Franks. I know enough about him now for my purposes. The rest he can tell me himself. Maria, I may be able to help him stay out of jail. I can do that if I talk to him.
Well, how
My name's Johnny Dollar. I'm at the Pioneer Hotel. Remember that.
But Mr. Dollar...
I don't know whether he's phoned you yet or not. A man like that's going to need help, money. I'm not asking you if he's contacted you. But listen to me carefully. If he does phone you or contact you in any way, ask him to phone me. If you ever respected him or if you want to help him now, please ask him to telephone me. Thanks. I drove back to the hotel and waited for results. Another 12 hours went by. Hillary Franks was still missing, and Mrs. Kennedy was still refusing to admit anything. Finally, about 11 o'clock that night, my phone rang. Johnny Dollar. Hello.
This is Hillary Franks.
Where are you?
Never mind. Dollar, they know all about me back at the home office, I suppose?
Yes.
I'd like to explain some things to you so you can pass them on. I'd like the people back there to know why I did it. Well, before I leave town...
You won't get far. The police are looking for you.
Oh, I can get away all right.
Mr. Franks, Worldwide doesn't want to prosecute. The notoriety would be bad for them. If you'd make a statement, sign it, I think I could talk them into dropping the whole matter.
Maybe we'd better get together.
Come on over.
Oh, no, I'm not that crazy. Do you know how to get to the San Javier mission?
I can find it.
In 15 minutes?
Right.
And Dollar?
Yeah?
It's right out in the open. If you bring the police, I'll use a gun. I bought one this morning.
All right, Mr. Franks. Johnny Dollar.
Jim Carter, Johnny. Anything on Hillary Franks?
He just telephoned me 2 minutes ago.
What?
I'm on my way to meet him now and try and make a deal. I told him if he'd give me a statement about the attempt to fraud Worldwide on Lansing's $50,000 policy, I'd do my best to have them drop charges.
Well, you didn't make any promises, Johnny.
I couldn't make any promises, Jim, but I'll do my best to see that the charges are dropped if he gives me that statement.
Well, if he gives you that statement, I'll help you. Where are you meeting him?
At a place near here.
He knows every cop in the area is looking for him.
Yeah?
Be sure he doesn't give you a bullet, kiddo.
Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar in Tucson, Arizona to the Universal Adjustment Bureau, Home Office, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is a further accounting of expenditures during my investigation of... Well, it was a case of $50,000 insurance to one Arlene Kennedy, unless I could prove my point in the Lansing fraud. Expense account item 10, $10, cab fare from my hotel to the Mission San Javier to talk to Hillary Franks, the insurance agent with no future ahead. I used a taxi cab instead of my rented car because I didn't want to waste time searching around for the mission. It was a few miles outside of town over rough and broken desert roads. An ancient missionary church standing stark against the moon-filled night.
Here we are, mister.
Good. Here. Keep the change.
Well, don't you want me to wait for you?
No, I'll get back okay.
Not many places to call a cab from out here.
Yeah, I know.
One of the Padres, your friend?
No, I'm new around here.
You all right, mister? You feel all right? You loaded or something?
No, why?
We're coming out here at midnight.
Well, it's just a whim, friend. Don't worry about it.
I bet sure would. Mister?
Yeah?
You gonna meet somebody here or something?
Why?
I just saw a guy standing over by the bell tower.
Oh, thanks. Good night.
Over here, Mr. Dollar. Careful, Dollar.
Hillary Franks had a .38 pointed right at my chest. In the bright moonlight, I could see that he was still wearing the same clothes he'd had on 2 days before in his office. He needed to shave, and judging from the circles under his eyes, he hadn't slept much. He was pale and shaken. The gun wobbled in his hand.
Anybody with you?
I came along.
Did you tell anybody you were meeting me?
Jim Carter. He's been working the case with me.
Did you tell him where?
No. Hey, look, you don't need that gun, Franks. Put it away. I just came here to talk with you.
All right.
Thanks. Want to smoke?
Thank you. Why did you talk to Carter? What did he say?
He said he'd help me try and have the charges dropped against you if you give us a statement. Now, you have two of us on your side, Mr. Franks, if you want to cooperate. Do you?
I want to straighten out what I can, Mr. Dollar.
Well, now's the time to do it. What was your deal with Arlene Kennedy, James Lansing's sister and beneficiary?
I met Arlene Kennedy right after my wife died. I guess I was very lucky.
Oh, that's perfectly natural.
I became interested in Arlene because we had a great many things in common. So I thought. I mean, she was a widow and had no one except her brother, James Lansing, in Los Angeles. And we went together, and eventually I asked her to marry me. But she laughed at me.
Why?
I guess I'm not an exciting man, a witty one, or even an interesting one, Mr. Dollar. Mrs. Kennedy made me feel as though my whole life had been hopeless, useless. Raising children, selling insurance. She made me feel as though I'd miss a great deal in life unless I married her. What is it? What do you want from me? What do you want from life, I'd ask her. And she'd only laugh at me.
Go on.
I just can't tell you how desperate it made me feel. I loved her, Mr. Dollar. I wanted her.
Did she ever answer your questions?
Oh, many times. She pointed out that her trust funds pay her over $700 a month for life. And she knew that my commissions and salary as a broker came to about the same. Oh, Mr. Dollar, we could have lived very comfortably on that kind of income. But Arlene talked of traveling, of Europe, of clothes, and, oh, I don't know, things her family had been able to afford for her once, many years ago. And she said she wouldn't marry unless we could look forward to that kind of life.
She wanted $50,000 in cash instead of money just trickling in every month.
That's about it.
When did she get around to the proposition, her brother's insurance?
Her brother came here from Los Angeles one day. The doctors there gave him a year or two to live. Oh, yes, he was pretty shot. Been drinking for years. He'd used up all his money, a long time before. He asked Arlene to help him. She paid his apartment rent and gave him enough money for liquor. And then one day she came right out with it. She said she was investing in him. And he was a good risk. Because she knew he'd die. That's how she put it to me.
Mm-hmm.
Arlene said all I had to do was see to it that her brother had a nice fat policy. He was going to die. Why not cash in on it? I must have been crazy to even think about it.
How did you work it? I mean, how did Dr. Mayhood pass him?
I paid a man $100 to go to Dr. Mayhood's office and take the physical for Lansing.
What was the man's name?
Oh, no, I wouldn't tell you that, Mr. Dollar. He's not involved in anything.
All right, we'll let that go. Once you arranged for Lansing to become insured, you and Mrs. Kennedy just planned on waiting for him to die.
That was the general idea in view of what the Los Angeles doctors had said. Once I'd done it, gotten him insured, it was too late to turn back.
Did you want to turn back?
Yes.
What did Mrs. Kennedy say about backing out?
She thought I was weak and afraid.
Oh, then things weren't so good between you.
Oh, they never were, Mr. Dollar.
The idea was to wait for Lansing to die, collect the $50,000 and get married, huh?
I suppose so, yes, but once he was insured, she talked less and less about our getting married.
You're leaving something out, Mr. Franks.
Huh?
Didn't she tell you exactly what kind of a position you were in? Didn't she fix it so that you couldn't make a move? Legally, she'd done nothing wrong. It was you who had arranged for the physical, you who had made the application for insurance in the name of her brother.
Oh, yes. She was clear about all that. And she told me so every time she felt like it.
When you write down what you just told me and sign it, we can hold it over Mrs. Kennedy's head to prove attempted defraud and collusion. Now, would you do that, Mr. Franks?
Yes.
Then I guess we'd better get back into town.
All right.
Come on, Mr. Franks. We walked 3 miles over to the highway, flagged down a car, and got back to the hotel about 2:30 in the morning, got Jim Carter out of bed. Enclosed, fine notarized statement of Hillary Franks explaining his part in the matter regarding policy 678JN23L. Before he was finished, Carter had already telephoned the Tucson police, telling them that the charges were being dropped against Franks and that he was no longer a fugitive. Then he placed a long-distance call to Worldwide's president in Hartford.
Jim Carter, sir. I want to ask you not to prosecute Hillary Franks in this matter. Yes, sir, he's given us a complete statement about the whole thing. I don't think we have to go any farther than that. Oh, look, the guy made one mistake, the first one in 17 years. He suffered enough for it already. Yes, sir. Dollar feels that way, too. Yes, sir. I think it's okay, Mr. Franks.
All right. I thank you.
What are you going to do, Mr. Franks?
Well, sure, I'll never sell insurance again. I think I'll close up and just move away. Far away. Thank you.
Poor guy. Oh, let's clean up the rest of this and get out of this town.
Sure, Johnny.
Hillary Franks pulled out of Tucson that afternoon. When Mrs. Kennedy was shown a carbon of the enclosed statement of Hillary Franks, she instructed her attorneys to withdraw the suit against Worldwide. Expense account, item 11, $75. Hotel and board while in Tucson. Item 12, $402.15. Plane tickets, Tucson to Hartford for Carter and myself. We were scheduled to leave at 1:30 in the morning. 2 hours before plane time, I dropped by Mrs. Kennedy's house to have her sign a release of all claims on the insurance company. And for other reasons.
Help me, Mr. Dollar. Please help me.
I carried Arlene Kennedy to the couch, and I did what I could for her. I phoned the police and told them to bring an ambulance. After that, I began looking around. I found a dark stain on the window, still leading outside of the back of the house. On the floor, a blood-stained letter opener. There was no gun in sight anywhere. I decided if I had been stabbed with a letter opener, it would be easier to try to make it out the back way than risk the street that was bound to be full of policemen any minute. I was right. Hillary Franks was on a ledge of rock that rose above the back of the house. I ducked behind some cactus plants.
Get away from me!
You know I won't. You know I wouldn't when I let you walk out this afternoon.
Johnny Dollar?
That's right. Now put that gun away and come on off that ledge.
Get away! Go away!
You missed by a mile. You don't know anything about shooting a gun. Come on down.
Stay where you are. Don't do anything foolish.
I'm coming after you.
I'll shoot.
Good shot, Dollar.
Can you walk?
No.
Why did you do it, Mr. Franks?
I came back to see her tonight. She laughed at me, said if we had gotten the insurance money, she was planning to run away with someone else.
Oh.
She just used me all along.
Mrs. Kennedy was dead when the police got there. Hillary Franks died en route to the receiving hospital. Item 13, $15, hotel. One more night in Tucson. Expense account total, $1,121.13. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Remember, there'll be another exciting story beginning next Monday night.
Next week, a quick trip to New York, to the bright lights, the glamour of Broadway with its theaters, its actors, and, some very bad actors. You might even say killers. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. Written by John Dawson, it is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone. Heard in this week's cast were Mary Jane Croft, Vivi Janis, Gene Tatum, Hy Averback, Barney Phillips, Russell Thorson, and Howard McNear. Musical supervision by Amerigo Marino. Be sure to join us on Monday night, same time and station, for another exciting story of Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. This is Roy Rowan speaking.
Welcome back. An interesting story. This one was adapted from the Chicago fraud matter, which was a John Lund story from 1953. I think this expands on it nicely. Listening to this time around, one line stands out to me in part 4. And Johnny says, "Mr. Franks, you worry me." That really carries a lot of weight as you look back on it. What Johnny had identified was that Hillary Franks was off, emotionally and mentally. He wasn't acting normally or how you would expect in the questioning scenes because he was in a bit of a state of shock. As Johnny said, the fact that Lansing's physical condition was identified really was a fluke. Probably the odds of this being pulled off were well above 90%. If he had not been found not able to be identified immediately, the insurance company would not have called in an investigator. Johnny ran up an expense account in excess of $1,000, and insurance companies don't do that if the cause of death is obvious and they have to pay off, and they're going to have to regardless. So he's in a state of shock that this have been paid off, and Johnny has some really obvious sympathy for him. And I think in the final part you get a picture of all that he had gone through. In modern terms, there were a lot of words we would probably use for that relationship, whether we'd call it toxic, or we'd say Mrs. Kennedy was a narcissist, or however we would end up diagnosing it. But she definitely emotionally manipulated him at the time in his life when he was most vulnerable. And she just continued to push and push and push. And so it's definitely a downbeat ending. And it was a tough case for Johnny because he was frustrated throughout this, first by the doctor, who in retrospect was just a little arrogant rather than trying to hide anything from Johnny, trying to shield himself from any legal liability. And then all the efforts Johnny took to try and give Franks a break ends up backfiring in the end. Also, a solid performance by Howard McNear. He's often remembered and praised for the eccentric characters he played on Johnny Dollar, such as Alvin Cartwright in later years, as well as on other series, these sort of oddballs. But here we get to hear McNear really sink his teeth into a much more straight-laced dramatic role, and he does a superb job with it, and really captures the sadness and the tragedy of Hillary Franks. Well, now it is time to thank our Patreon supporter of the day, and I want to go ahead and thank Tommy. Tommy has been one of our Patreon supporters since August, currently supporting us at the rookie level of $2 or more per month. Thanks so much for your support, Tommy. And that will do it for today. A reminder, I do encourage you to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a Great Detectives episode. You can do so with your favorite podcast software, including TuneIn, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, or the Amazon Music app at amazon.com/OTR Detective. And if you are enjoying this podcast, please be sure to rate and review it wherever you're downloading it from. We'll start another Johnny Dollar serial on Tuesday. Join us back here tomorrow for Tales of the Texas Rangers, where...
I'm sorry, Ranger. I don't mean to keep bawling like this.
That's all right, man.
Tom ain't bad. Nobody knows that better than me. I didn't want to come here, but I gotta keep him from getting locked up again.
We'll do everything we can to help. Now, about this man who came to your place this morning. You say you never saw him before?
This morning was the first time.
And you don't know what he paid your husband to do?
No, but it must have been something bad. Else he wouldn't have given Tom a gun.
You sure your husband said he was heading north?
I'm sure of that. Tom never fooled with a gun before. He wouldn't hurt nobody on purpose, but he's got an awful bad temper.
I'm afraid we already know that from his record, ma'am.
The trouble he got into before, that was an accident. He didn't mean to kill Bob Peters. Bob wouldn't give him his wages, and Tom got mad and hit him.
He served his time for that, Mrs. Dawson. Our problem is to keep him from getting into any more trouble.
I don't know what I'll do if he has to go to jail again. It was so awful the last time. Oh, Ranger, you gotta stop Tom from doing something bad. You got to.
We will, ma'am, if we can find him.
I hope you'll be with us then. In the meantime, do send your comments to box13@greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Detectives and check us out on Instagram. Instagram.com/greatdetectives. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.